Picture this. You're at the height of your career, making millions, loved by fans around the world, and then one day you just disappear. You walk away from it all and never look back. Sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what these 10 Golden Age Hollywood stars did. They had everything most people dream of, but they threw it all away for reasons that will shock you. I'm about to tell you the real stories behind some of the most mysterious disappearances in Hollywood history. These aren't just rumors or gossip. These are documented cases of major stars who literally vanished from the spotlight at the peak of their fame. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why some of them made the smartest decision of their lives. Greta Garbo was arguably the biggest female star of the 1930s. This Swedish actress had everything: beauty, talent, and a mystique that drove audiences wild. She made hits like Grand Hotel and Camille, and was earning more money than almost anyone in Hollywood. But in 1941, at just 36 years old, she made a movie called Two-Faced Woman that bombed so badly it destroyed her confidence completely. Here's the crazy part. Instead of trying to make a comeback like most stars would, Garbo just walked away. She spent the next 49 years of her life living as a private citizen in New York. She'd take long walks, shop for antiques, and live off her smart investments. When reporters tried to interview her, she'd literally run away. She became more famous for being a recluse than she ever was for her movies. People always wondered why she did it. The truth is, Garbo was always uncomfortable with fame. She hated publicity, refused to sign autographs, and once said, "I want to be left alone," a line that followed her for the rest of her life. She died in 1990, never having made another film, but somehow her legend only grew stronger because of her absence. Now here's a story that sounds like a fairy tale, but it's completely real. Grace Kelly was Hollywood royalty in the 1950s. She starred in Alfred Hitchcock classics like Rear Window and To Catch a Thief. She was elegant, beautiful, and had that perfect American girl image that everyone loved. She won an Academy Award for The Country Girl in 1955 and seemed destined for decades of stardom. But then she met Prince Rainier I of Monaco at the Cannes Film Festival in 1955. One thing led to another, and by 1956, she was giving up her entire Hollywood career to become an actual princess. She literally traded movie sets for a palace. The crazy thing is, her Hollywood contract had years left on it, and she was at the absolute peak of her career. MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer begged her to stay. They offered her more money, better roles, everything. But Kelly had made up her mind. She wanted a real life, not just playing characters on screen. She never acted in another Hollywood film. She did try to make a comeback in the late 1970s with a movie called Marnie, but the people of Monaco weren't happy about their princess acting again, so she backed out. Kelly died in a car crash in 1982, but she lived 26 years as royalty instead of continuing as a movie star. Jean Harlow's story is different because she didn't choose to walk away. Tragedy forced her out. But her impact on Hollywood was so huge that her early departure changed everything. Movies like Hell's Angels and Red Dust made her one of the biggest stars of the early 1930s. But here's what most people don't know. Harlow was dealing with serious health problems behind the scenes. She had kidney disease, and the studio system was literally working her to death. In 1937, at just 26 years old, she collapsed on the set of Saratoga and died a few days later. What makes this story so tragic is that Harlow wanted out before she died. She'd been complaining about feeling sick for months, but MGM kept pushing her to work. She'd told friends she wanted to quit acting and just live a normal life. She never got that chance. Her death was a wake-up call for Hollywood about how they treated their stars. It also created a myth around her that lasted for decades, the beautiful star who burned too bright and died too young. Veronica Lake had one of the most recognizable looks in 1940s Hollywood. That long blonde hair that covered one eye became her trademark. She starred in film noir classics like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia with Alan Ladd. For a few years in the early 1940s, she was one of the hottest stars in Hollywood. But Lake's career fell apart faster than almost any star in history. By the late 1940s, she was already being pushed out by the studio system. Her drinking problems got worse, and she became difficult to work with. But instead of trying to rehabilitate her image, Lake just gave up on Hollywood completely. She moved to Florida and worked regular jobs. She was a bartender, a hotel clerk, and even worked in a factory. Can you imagine ordering a drink from Veronica Lake and not knowing it? She lived in complete obscurity for years, struggling financially and dealing with alcoholism. The saddest part is that Lake seemed relieved to be away from Hollywood. She'd tell people that the movie business had destroyed her life, and she was happier being anonymous. She made a few attempts at comebacks in the 1960s and 1970s, but they never worked out. She died in 1973, largely forgotten by the public that had once worshipped her. Ann Sheridan was known as the Oomph Girl, a nickname Warner Brothers gave her to compete with other studios' sex symbols. She was in huge hits like Angels with Dirty Faces, with James Cagney and Pat O'Brien. Throughout the 1940s, she was one of Warner's biggest stars and seemed to have everything going for her. But Sheridan got tired of being typecast as just a pretty face. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, not just as a pin-up girl. When Warner Brothers kept refusing to give her better roles, she started fighting back. She went on strike several times, which was almost unheard of for stars back then. By the early 1950s, Sheridan had had enough. She left Hollywood and moved to a ranch in Texas. She raised cattle, grew vegetables, and lived the simple life she'd always wanted. She only made a few movies after that, and most of them were small independent films that nobody saw. What's interesting about Sheridan is that she never regretted her decision. She'd tell reporters that she was happier on her ranch than she ever was in Hollywood. She died in 1967, and most people had forgotten she'd ever been a movie star. Frances Farmer's story is one of the most tragic in Hollywood history. She was a beautiful, intelligent actress who starred in movies like Come and Get It in the late 1930s. She was different from other Hollywood stars. She was politically outspoken, intellectually curious, and refused to play the Hollywood game. That independence got her in trouble. The studio system didn't know what to do with a star who wouldn't follow their rules. Farmer started drinking heavily and getting into public fights. In 1942, she was arrested for drunk driving, and that's when her life really fell apart. Her own mother had her committed to a mental institution, where she spent years being subjected to horrible treatments, including lobotomies. When she finally got out, she was a completely different person, quiet, submissive, and broken. Farmer never really came back to Hollywood after that. She did some small TV work in the 1950s and 1960s, but she was essentially done with acting. She moved to Indianapolis and worked as a hotel clerk and secretary. She died in 1970, and it wasn't until years later that people realized how badly the system had treated her. Her story became a symbol of how Hollywood could destroy the people it claimed to love. It's one of the most heartbreaking examples of a star who didn't choose to walk away. She was pushed out and never recovered. Now here's a story that might surprise you, because Cary Grant seemed to have it all figured out. He was one of the most successful leading men in Hollywood history. Movies like North by Northwest, An Affair to Remember, and Charade made him a legend. He was suave, charming, and seemed to get better with age. But in 1966, at age 62, Grant just stopped making movies. He turned down role after role, including parts that would have earned him millions. People couldn't understand why he was walking away when he was still one of the biggest stars in the world. The truth is, Grant had gotten tired of the business. He'd been acting for over 30 years and wanted to try something different. He became a businessman and spent time with his daughter. He also started experimenting with LSD therapy, which was legal back then, because he wanted to understand himself better. Grant lived another 20 years after retiring from movies, and he seemed genuinely happy with his decision. He'd make public appearances and give speeches, but he never acted again. He once said that he quit while he was ahead because he didn't want people to remember him as an old man trying to play young roles. His retirement was so unusual because most stars from that era kept working until they died or couldn't get roles anymore. Grant chose to leave on his own terms, which was almost unheard of in Hollywood. Kim Novak was one of the biggest stars of the 1950s. She was in classic films like Picnic and Vertigo, and Columbia Pictures was grooming her to be the next Rita Hayworth. She had the looks, the talent, and the studio backing to become a major star for decades. But Novak hated the Hollywood system from the beginning. She felt like the studio was controlling every aspect of her life: what she wore, who she dated, even what she said in interviews. She was naturally shy and introverted, and all the publicity made her miserable. By the early 1960s, Novak started pulling back from Hollywood. She moved to a ranch in Oregon and focused on painting and sculpture. She only made a few movies after that, and most of them were small independent films. What's remarkable about Novak is how she managed to disappear while still being alive. For decades, people wondered what happened to her. She'd occasionally give interviews, but she made it clear that she preferred her quiet life to Hollywood stardom. She's still alive today, living as an artist and rancher. She once said that leaving Hollywood saved her sanity. Looking at what happened to other stars who stayed too long, she might have been right. Now, Marilyn Monroe didn't exactly walk away from fame. Her death in 1962 cut her career short. But what most people don't know is that she was actively trying to change her image and take control of her career right before she died. Monroe was tired of being typecast as the dumb blonde. She'd been studying acting with Lee Strasberg in New York and wanted to do serious dramatic roles. She was also trying to break free from her studio contracts so she could choose her own projects. In the months before her death, Monroe was talking about stepping away from Hollywood completely. She wanted to focus on her acting studies and maybe do some stage work. She was exhausted from years of being treated like a commodity instead of a person. We'll never know if Monroe would have actually walked away from fame, but the signs were there. She was becoming more reclusive and seemed genuinely unhappy with her life in the spotlight. Her death at age 36 ended those plans, but it's interesting to think about what might have happened if she'd lived longer. Rita Hayworth was one of the most beautiful and talented stars of the 1940s. Movies like Gilda made her a global icon, and she was often called the love goddess. She seemed to have everything: beauty, talent, and worldwide fame. But Hayworth's personal life was a disaster. She went through multiple marriages, including one to Prince Ali Khan, and none of them worked out. The pressure of being seen as a sex symbol was destroying her, and she started drinking heavily to cope. By the late 1950s, Hayworth was pulling back from Hollywood. She was becoming more selective about her roles and spending more time out of the public eye. What people didn't know at the time was that she was developing Alzheimer's disease, which was affecting her memory and ability to work. Her last major film was The Wrath of God in 1972, but she'd essentially retired from acting years earlier. She spent her final years living quietly, away from the cameras and publicity that had defined her life. Hayworth's story is sad because she never really got to enjoy a peaceful retirement. The disease took away her memories of her great career, and she died in 1987 without really understanding how much she'd meant to people. So there you have it, 10 Golden Age Hollywood stars who walked away from fame, either by choice or by force. Some of them found peace and happiness away from the spotlight. Others struggled with the transition from superstar to regular person. But all of them proved that fame isn't everything, and sometimes the smartest thing you can do is know when to quit. What's really interesting is how different their stories are. Some left because they were tired of the system, others because of personal problems or health issues. But they all shared one thing: they reached a point where continuing their careers just wasn't worth it anymore. These stories make you think about what we really want from life. Is it fame and money, or is it peace and privacy? These stars had the fame and money, but most of them seemed happier when they found the peace and privacy. The next time you see a modern celebrity talking about taking a break from the spotlight, remember these golden age stars who actually did it. They proved that you can walk away from fame and survive, and in many cases, you might even be better off for it.